My name is Ben Cox and I head up our digital health offering at Team Consulting. For those that don't know of Team, we're based just outside Cambridge in the UK. We collaborate closely with pharma and medtech companies, bringing together our expertise in user experience and innovation, engineering and systems, and regulatory compliance. Specifically in digital health, we work across a range of tech segments from digital ecosystem development and digital therapeutics to patient experience and engagement, wearables, and also digital health technologies in clinical trials. So today I'm going to talk about digital user experience, or UX, specifically in the context of clinical trials. We've been fortunate to have worked on a number of digital tools and products for clinical trials, which present their own specific challenges, so we wanted to share some ideas on how to approach this important topic. So I'm going to cover three areas. Firstly, the opportunities and challenges for digital and connected health in clinical trials. These have been widely discussed, of course, with new tools, devices, and apps providing trial subjects with the potential to report more meaningful outcomes with better efficiency and flexibility. I'll also briefly cover meaningful measures and meaningful products. These are both key to realizing the potential benefits of digital and connected health in clinical trials. And then finally cover how a typical project might run with a specific UX approach and principles to ensure we can focus on user value and maximize the chance of success. So starting off with the opportunities. Over recent years, there's been an increasing interest in the use of digital health technologies and decentralized clinical trials. Digital innovation is offering both ongoing improvements to existing trials and new ways of conducting better trials for the future, improving subject adherence and retention and increasing clinical capacity. And the use of technology and digital biomarkers such as wearables and apps allows measurements to be captured in a more realistic manner, objectively, more frequently, and on an individual level with lower burden for subjects. Meaningful measures rely on accurate, reliable, and value-based digital tools and endpoints, measuring outcomes for individual subjects, for example, sleep, activity, or pain, or measures associated with important clinical outcomes. These measures can provide far deeper insights when compared to traditional metrics. There are a number of key advantages to the use of digital and connected health in clinical trials. Allowing measurements to be conducted completely at home, which can lead to increased participation rates and enable trials to be conducted in more vulnerable populations, such as with older adults and children. Research has shown a significant increase in willingness to participate in mobile or decentralized trials compared to traditional trials. Digital health technologies can also offer increased measurement frequency and situation-relevant measures, and the ability to capture data in a more natural environment, resulting in increased real-world validity. So as well as opportunities, the adoption of digital health technologies also presents several challenges. One of the biggest challenges is one that's specific to the clinical trial context, where there are typically many different players involved. It's challenging to integrate new tools and new ways of working into what is a complex multi-stakeholder environment. In the projects we've worked on, it's typical for pharma and tech companies to be working in partnership with multiple systems and applications from multiple vendors. So it can be quite a fragmented ecosystem, and we therefore need to consider end users at all levels, not just trial subjects. In almost all situations, users desire to complete tasks or get their work done with a minimal amount of effort, and clinical trials are no different. Clinical trial teams are expected to work with multiple products and systems, and most are uninterested in becoming application experts. And subjects themselves may be required to manage different instruments and devices over extended time periods in accordance with complex protocols. So it starts to become clear that user experience and usability is vital to optimize the use of digital health technologies. We can start by thinking about the more general user challenges in connected health, such as onboarding, engagement, and retention. At a basic level, solutions need to be tolerable and require as little manual input as possible to ensure we can increase access to as many subjects as possible. And we must aim to minimize technical and usability issues that impact user experience, such as reduced phone battery life or the need to use multiple interfaces and devices. Also, where possible, we should avoid duplication of data entry or inconsistent interface design, which may lead to errors, workarounds, or reduced compliance. So let's take a step back for a moment and consider the design more generally of digital products. I've pulled a couple of definitions here that I think are helpful. Digital products are any kind of software-enabled tool. They use pixels and code to deliver some kind of functional value to the end user. They make something useful happen. A digital product is a software-enabled product or service that offers some form of utility to a human being. In both cases, note the words useful and utility. Designing and developing a digital product can be complex with many stakeholders and opinions, but at the end of the day, the solutions we work on must add value. We can go further and think about what makes a product meaningful. These are products that somehow resonate with people's needs and match their values. So we must work hard to understand the end user. In a clinical trial context, we might first think of the subject or patient, but a solution must work just as well for all stakeholders and teams working in a clinical trial. And there are other ways we can think about meaning, like products that are culturally relevant, matching the needs and aspirations of groups of people, inspiring them to do better. Products that remove barriers and provide lasting value, rather than just being a forgettable short-term fix. And products that are trustworthy. The opportunities for digital health technologies are clear and unprecedented, but their potential can only be fully realized if they're developed with all end users in mind. It might be a stretch to think we can design truly meaningful products for clinical trials, but having this basic mindset and understanding user needs allows us to objectively identify and then prioritize meaningful features and services. Another way to look at this is to focus on user value. One of the biggest decisions when introducing a new digital health technology is actually one of the first ones. What is the problem we're trying to solve? There could be multiple problems. Also, is the solution based on some real evidence or user insight? And what is the desired outcome? For a successful and meaningful digital product, it doesn't matter how well designed and pixel perfect it is if it fails to offer some real tangible user value. In order to tackle these questions, there are a number of UX methodologies and tools that we can use to understand users and workflows, all with the goal of meeting user needs. So user experience is a methodology that starts with researchers immersing themselves in the world of the user of a product, service, or system to understand what they do and how and why they do it. It involves putting users at the center of the design and development process and establishing an iterative cycle of research, design, and evaluation. In following a UX approach, it's important to capture and understand all the critical needs of users, to make informed design decisions based on user-derived evidence, not opinion, to know your users and get them involved as early as possible, and to establish a cycle of research, design, and evaluation, and of course to iterate. But it's more than just taking a UX approach. It's about having a particular mindset and following key principles to help guide your thinking. These are some principles that I think are relevant to working on problems in a clinical trial context. Firstly, to understand the context itself, to understand the specific locations and conditions in which the solution will be used. Then to examine tools and data, exploring the full range of tools, systems, and data, of which there are many, that may be used in conjunction with the solution. To factor complexity, to understand how the solution may integrate with existing workflows. To balance innovation, to identify opportunities to innovate whilst being mindful of existing validated systems and established practices. And finally, validating the problem and the solution, making sure to collaborate and continuously evaluate both the problem space and the solution as it emerges with relevant stakeholders, users, and subject matter experts. So what might a typical project look like when thinking about the integration of new digital tools and new ways of working in a clinical trial context? This is a somewhat simplified view, and in reality the process is not linear in this way. But it's really these key activities that are important, and I'll talk more about each of these in a moment. Typically, we might expect a small team of UX designers working closely in collaboration with a development and clinical trial team to spend anything from a few weeks to a few months working through these stages, ultimately to reach a decision about functionalities that can be built and start offering some real value to users. So the process starts with research and interviews. This really gives us a tool to interrogate the problem space. Exploring workflows and asking questions over and over again with end users can reveal issues that may not come up initially, as users can become very used to working according to established practices. But by digging deeper, they may start to realize, oh yeah, this gives me a couple of days of extra work, or I wish I could access these data in a different format. So working in an unstructured and explorative way can be used here to reduce preconceptions we might have and to uncover valuable unknowns. Also, desk-based research can provide a useful foundation, as many clinical trial roles are specific and technical. It's very important to build a deep understanding of each user's situation and context to identify challenges and opportunities. Looking at job descriptions, literature, and other online resources can be used to start to define user profiles and to identify some of the key challenges or problems that users experience, and we can then start to validate these with subject matter experts. Desk-based research can be an ongoing process, making use of time between interviews and participant availability to identify any further gaps in our understanding. Given that we're working in a complex multi-stakeholder environment, we need to ensure that all users have a seat at the table. For some projects, it might be that we need to take account of users ranging from site staff and subjects all the way up to global sponsor leads. We also need to take account of the full trial lifecycle and all phases through the study. This can be quite a challenge given limited time and resource, so this is where subject matter experts can be invaluable to represent a number of different users in the process. So we can then start to define user roles. In other UX projects, we often document personas which focus on a semi-fictional individual representative user. But when working on digital health technologies for clinical trials, it can often make sense to define user groups or profiles instead. We spend less time exploring how an individual user thinks or feels and focus more time on specific user group behaviors and goals. This means we can document profiles based on stakeholders' knowledge of the user instead of direct research data. This allows us to rapidly identify key differentiators between user roles and choose measures that help us to contrast between them. For example, in clinical trials, we might be interested in different roles such as editors, reviewers, and viewers for study setup, or different submitter and viewer roles for study data. Once we've been able to define user roles, we can then work on understanding the process and tasks involved for each user group goal. Task modeling provides a flexible framework prior to user journey mapping because it allows us to consider steps in a task model agnostic of the platform or interface a user is interacting with. For example, when setting up a digital tool in a new trial, there can be many different steps and several approaches, some sequential and some not. So task modeling helps us to understand these steps and workflows. This method can also be useful if you have an existing system and want to identify improvements. When you want to solve problems for users, it's important to understand where in their current journey the problems arise. A journey map is a visualization of the process that a user goes through in order to accomplish a goal. Building from our task models, we can use journey mapping to highlight the unique steps in a user journey and record the potential frustrations or blockers users may encounter at a particular point. This can be very helpful to look at a problem space from multiple points of view and helps to identify design opportunities. It also helps to bring together development teams to create a common empathy and understanding. Progressing further, we can start to map the overall system. Blueprints, often called service blueprints, allow us to visualize the interactions between the end user and different backstage actors and systems for a specific user journey. This tool is well suited to working on the integration of new tools in clinical trials, given the number of actors and the complexity of system interactions and data transfers. It also allows us to build a systemic view and capture vital details related to other systems and data. If you recall, I mentioned that one of the key challenges is that users are often faced with multiple systems and applications from multiple vendors. So it's vital to map this and identify the realities of working with different interfaces and data, even Word documents or messaging systems. Finally, and this is not necessarily towards the end of the process, we can conduct landscape review activities. This can be extremely helpful to understand potential competitors, common features, problems they appear to be solving, and unmet opportunities. Also, and importantly, to understand supporting systems to highlight potential overlaps and avoid building redundant features. With this information, we can make more informed judgments and weigh up the benefits of introducing certain functions or features. An example that comes up in the clinical trial context is messaging or querying functionality. It's very important to avoid overlap with other systems and to fully understand what may be involved in supporting such a feature. When we understand all of the systems a user may encounter, we understand the true picture of their overall experience. So with all of these inputs, we're then able to translate research findings into a feature set that enables users to achieve their goals. Working with key stakeholders, we can start to agree on the most appropriate workflows to complete the range of relevant tasks. We can start to consider what screens are needed and how they're arranged, what content needs to appear on each screen, and how it can be presented clearly. We can then create concept solutions using wireframing in order to gather feedback and agree on priority features. Of course, this is an iterative process where our main goal is to learn something new from each set of wireframes and to start to validate the solution. And this again highlights the need for close collaboration and continuous evaluation with the various stakeholders and subject matter experts. Once we're confident we've found a desirable concept that solves the problem, it's time to make a decision about the smallest set of functionalities that can be built and start to offer some real value. And we can do this by working through a prioritization exercise to reach a common understanding with the product team. So in summary for today's session, working on digital products and integrating technologies into a complex clinical trial setting is challenging. User experience is key to realizing the potential benefits and to capture more meaningful measures. We've shared a UX approach that can be used to identify and validate problems and build more meaningful digital products to solve them. By keeping these principles at the core of your project, it is possible to derive benefits for all stakeholders throughout the different stages of a clinical study and ultimately help drive towards a more successful outcome. We'll close here and take some questions, but please do reach out if you'd like to know any more about our work in digital health at Team.
So first question, at what stage should the UX design process begin before clinical trials?
Yeah, thanks. I think really as early as possible. It's kind of the obvious answer, but yeah, starting as early as possible will ultimately lead to the most chance of success in terms of the tool being implemented in a way that it can be used efficiently and be used to actually gather the meaningful data required. I suppose really the process probably starts with thinking about the problem that we're trying to solve, and probably product or development teams going out and trying to identify candidate digital health technologies that can provide the measures that are required. But ideally, as part of that technology evaluation, it would be important to consider factors relating to how those tools will be used. So thinking about the usability, the user experience, thinking about how they might be integrated with other systems. So I guess even in the identification of potential technologies, trying to consider those factors and then working through some of the sort of tools and processes I mentioned in terms of making sure the solution is going to be fit for purpose.
Excellent. And another question someone's asked, what is the best tool to create and draft UX pathways?
So in terms of a design tool, as a design team here, we're increasingly working with cloud-based UX design and prototyping tools, Figma being the main one. That helps to support our design workflow right from the early stages that I talked about, such as like defining the user profiles, starting with the task modeling exercises, all the way through to ultimately wireframing solution, prototyping solutions. We also have used Miro quite a lot as a collaborative tool. I think I mentioned a few points in the presentation, the importance of working with different stakeholders throughout the process. And so these cloud-based tools like Figma and Miro are really important to allow that collaboration to happen and to allow us to continuously evaluate the problem that we're trying to solve, making sure that's mapped accurately and sufficiently, and then to start to evaluate any solutions as they emerge and then go through sort of prioritization to actually get it down to something that can be built and implemented.
Excellent. So another question, someone said, so you've spoken about meaningful products. Do you have any examples of meaningless ones?
That's a good question. I think I hope came across in the talk today was that we're talking about meaning in a couple of different ways. So the first angle on this is to think about the fact that products or technologies that are introduced to clinical trials, they need to enable meaningful measures to be captured. So it's important that the measures we're capturing are associated with important clinical outcomes, providing those additional insights, leading to greater efficiencies in the running of a clinical trial. So I don't know about meaningless examples in terms of digital health technologies in clinical trials, I guess I've heard examples of trials where teams have attempted to use wearable consumer technology for activity monitoring, for example. But the data available has not been sufficient to provide the insight required compared to traditional metrics or measures. So in those cases, it's been necessary to identify and develop specific technologies. I think the other way of looking at this is to think about what makes a product more meaningful to use, so more about the experience for the person using that technology. There are some examples, I think, of general technologies that have been introduced, and one example I can think of is like those early location sharing services or apps where people could like choose to share their location in an app. That sort of thing, might seem initially fun or exciting to use, may appeal to more techie people, but with these technologies, people then at some point start to question the value it's adding and might stop using it, or might feel it's adding to their day in a way that's not particularly adding value. So we should always kind of ask ourselves, is the tool like making someone's job or life better in some way? So in that example, with those location sharing services, really the value comes when you can bring together that location sharing with some other meaningful service or guidance to people. So like as in integrating that with, I don't know, a map that shows someone where they need to be, etc. So it's kind of a very general example of maybe introducing technologies that don't have sufficient meaning initially. In clinical trials, I don't want to say that UX, this talk is not suggesting that UX is completely neglected in the implementation of digital health technologies, but there's certainly examples we've seen where users are being loaded with, quite a number of days of extra work through needing to implement additional technologies. We know site staff particularly often overwhelmed with the amount of administration and they have in terms of setting up and delivering different technologies as part of a clinical trial protocol. Maybe they can't access data scientists might not be able to access the data in the format required, or maybe their teams are dealing with overlapping features. So it's just an interesting observation really from our experience that yes, we need to consider the patients, the subjects in a clinical trial, absolutely. But for these technologies to really add value, we have to consider all of the different stakeholders and make sure that the systems are adding value for everyone involved.
Excellent. And I think that quite relates to another question we've had. So I wonder if you could just expand on that slightly. What are the key challenges then with getting all of the different stakeholders to engage with these tools during clinical trials?
I think it's simply that, like in most jobs, people are busy, and they need. So introducing a new tool needs to be done in a way that allows someone to get the value they need from it in the most efficient way possible. I think people are in the clinical trial context is quite interesting because there are many vendors out there who have different types of interfaces and systems, and depending on how the trial has been set up, the people actually running the trial will have to be jumping between different types of interfaces, different platforms, different forms, etc. And I think that by kind of adding to that burden, it's decreasing the chance that people will find the time to do that in the way that we need them to do it to meet the protocol and deliver the best data. So they're kind of obvious challenges in a way, but it also suggests the importance of considering these things up front.